welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes webcast. This is sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune football beat writer Dave Matter. Dave, we just had a very long, enjoyable day in St. Louis at the Curators meeting, and it would appear from what we heard yesterday that Missouri is kind of on the fast track to the SEC. They've granted permission, or granted the right to Brady Deaton to kind of negotiate for them and explore other conference affiliations. I think it's an interesting topic. While A&M was deciding to leave, while Oklahoma was exploring leaving, Mike Alden brought up quite a few times that, you know, the CEOs of the league had gotten together and kind of pledged loyalty, and it was a disappointment that now other teams are breaking that loyalty. Now Missouri is doing it. In your mind, is Missouri kind of doing the same as other? I mean, are they acting in a disloyal manner or no?
Technically they are, but I think the more that other schools started flirting with other conferences, it seemed like less of a sin to do it on your own. And I also think that press conference that Brady Deaton had a couple Thursdays ago, I think that night was kind of a game changer for the way that Oklahoma behaved, and especially President David Boren by holding his press conference 15 minutes earlier and saying some things that kind of misinterpreted things or intentionally was misleading on what was agreed upon on the conference call earlier that night. And I think that might have changed the tone that Missouri took from there as far as the loyalty oath to the rest of the league. And I don't know, that just seemed to a point of where the tone of all of this changed a little bit from Missouri's perspective.
Yeah, I think just generally speaking, not to put all this in Oklahoma, because obviously Missouri last year was more than happy to leave.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, I mean, they certainly don't have a leg to stand on as far as being proud members of the Big 12, but I think they still were very much on board with staying in the Big 12. At least Brady Deaton was, and keeping it together until David Boren came out and said, no, we're not going to be a wallflower in this, and then kind of led the charge to the Pac-12. And it wasn't until they got rebuffed there that they were so interested in things like granting them media rights for 6 years. And I think from Missouri's point of view, I think at some point, you know, loyalty and naivete are kind of, there's a fine line there, and I think you're starting to maybe cross it when you think, well, we're going to continue to let Oklahoma and Texas make all the decisions for us. You know, I think some of the schools that you feel kind of bad for, Kansas, Iowa State, Kansas State, Baylor, yeah, they've been constantly loyal, but they also have had no better options. It's like saying, boy, congratulations, you were a faithful husband. Well, if you didn't have any chances to cheat, I don't know how much we're patting you on the back. So I think I kind of see it that way. It probably would have been better if Missouri hadn't come out repeatedly and kind of chastised these other schools for being disloyal during the process, though. I guess that would be fair to say.
But at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for your program and for your fans and for everything involved in your side. And I think Missouri will be, if it can land somewhere in the SEC that's stable and happy for everybody, I think they can live with the way they got there.
I think, and the reason that in the end, you know, I would like to see them stay in the Big 12 if the Big 12 was worth staying in. But I think in the end, when you're in a league where you can't even really plan for the future, I mean, if Missouri, like say, is wanting to do a stadium expansion, which I think they do want to do, at least with luxury suites and club seats and that sort of thing, how do you really plan to even know how much money you're going to have if, you know, next year Texas is going to leave or Oklahoma is going to leave? I mean, I think you kind of got to figure out where you can be so you can actually move forward in a strategic way, and I think you just never are going to have that in the Big 12 because everyone is everybody's strictly looking out for their own best interest, which happens anywhere, but I think there's just so little trust between any of these people anymore. That it's just, the bridges have been burned so many times that I don't know how you really would proceed.
And even locking yourself in with the granting of media rights to the conference, not everybody's wearing the same handcuffs because Texas can get out of something like that easier than Missouri just because of that it's Texas and you know how rich they are down there, their situation with their boosters. So
they could leave 3 years early and pay it off, and another school couldn't.
Right.
All right. Well, we're assuming Missouri is leaving for the SEC. It's not a done deal yet, obviously. Just maybe, what are some of the nuts and bolts of what might happen here in the next few weeks, if that is going to happen?
Right. Well, Missouri pretty much can follow the path that Texas A&M took out, and that's, I think, fortunate for Missouri that there's basically a blueprint for doing this. And Texas A&M, to a degree, was able to follow what Nebraska and Colorado did a year earlier. And there are bylaws to explain and to make for these kind of exits. So yeah, Missouri can look at what A&M is doing, and really what A&M did was you kind of simultaneously have to negotiate your way out of the Big 12 and into the SEC. You don't want to leave until you know there's somewhere to go, and you don't want to go somewhere until you know that leaving the Big 12 is something you can afford to do. in regards to settlement fees and the threat of a lawsuit. So I think once Missouri figures out that they can afford to get out of the Big 12 with those things standing in their way to a degree, then they can safely make the move. And at that point, you have to formally apply to the SEC. But really, you don't make that step unless you've pretty much gotten the green light that they're going to take you. And the SEC, according to their bylaws, they have to have 3/4 of the membership agree to take you on, so that's 9 out of 12. And really, it doesn't make sense for Missouri to go this far, to do what they did in St. Louis, unless they have a pretty good feeling that they would be accepted.
It would be insane for them to have had that press conference last night, knowing what it would have done, knowing the effect it was going to have on their fans. I mean, I think when you're already kind of the leadership of the school is I don't know how many of the things that have happened in the past were really even their fault, but the perception is that, oh, somehow you botched this Big Ten thing. I don't know if they did.
Right.
But then, oh, we thought you had Matt Painter and you don't. Again, I think that was just Matt Painter's decision, but still, then if you kind of lead them to believe that you're going to the SEC, which overwhelmingly the fans want to do, and that rug gets pulled out from under, I mean, the internet will blow up.
Right.
I mean, it will explode.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think if you don't know that the SEC will take you and you can get in there, I mean, if you have any press conference at all last night, it would be to say, yeah, we're committed to the Big 12 going forward. So
right.
That's the biggest sign to me that this is sort of a...
And we know that last night's decision was motivated in part by the fan campaign. When they kind of took the temperature of the fans, they realized that this is what people wanted. We know that at some degree motivated them. Why then would they risk the backlash that will come just explosively down on them if they decide to stay in the Big 12?
Yeah, some people mention like this is some sort of maybe leverage tool that now Texas will think they're serious and they will make concessions on the content of the Longhorn Network or somehow share those revenues. It would not be worth a gamble whatsoever from Missouri's perspective to play that little game.
No, I think a few people in that room could maybe think that way, but I can't imagine all of them coming to a consensus that this is the way to go and risk that backlash.
All right, and there is a football game Saturday.
Really?
Maybe the last time we get to visit Manhattan, Kansas, so we're going to try to make it worthwhile. Actually, we're probably only going to be there for about 4 hours, and then we're going to be in Topeka, but we'll try to make it worthwhile somehow.
Yeah.
Missouri, though, they're 2-2. At this point in the season, they've usually been 4-0, so they're a little bit of a desperate team. They're facing a team that is ranked, surprisingly, Kansas State. They've just kind of been figuring out a way to win. How does Missouri match up in this game, and do you kind of see it as almost a must-win if Missouri's going to have a decent season?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Missouri has to win this game because they've still got, including Kansas State, 5 ranked opponents left on their schedule, so it's not going to get much easier from here. I think Missouri's defense probably matches up better against the K-State style of offense than it does against Oklahoma or Arizona State, up-tempo passing offenses that throw the ball downfield a lot. I mean, K-State likes to run it. They're very good at running the ball, but they like to control the clock, keep their offense on the field all day long if they can, methodically move up and down the field, and that's what worked for them against Miami and against Baylor. Kept it close enough to where they could manage the game in the fourth quarter. Don't throw the ball very often. And for Missouri, that just means they've got to get stops on first and second down and put Kansas State into some passing situations where they feel like their pass rush can take advantage and finally do what they really haven't done this year, is get after the quarterback. So if that happens, I think Missouri's has the better team. They just can't afford to be sloppy on offense, and they really have to take advantage of the few chances they might get on the field. And if not convert a bunch of third downs, and they have to just score in bunches because they can't afford to just have their offense and have James Franklin on the sideline watching the whole game.
Yeah. I think that where they've kind of struggled defensively is getting beat over the top. That's not so much of a concern against Kansas State. The run defense has been pretty solid. They've been good containing Kansas State's run game in recent years, even when they had Daniel Thomas and pretty good players. So yeah. I think it's a pretty good matchup for Missouri, unless you get like what you saw in the middle portion of the Oklahoma game, where you just get some 3-and-outs, and then you're just going to be standing there all day. You're never going to see the ball for long, long stretches. And then I think when that happens, offenses get a little jittery and try to get it all back at once. And so that could be the kind of the blueprint for losing. But Kansas State is just kind of has a little room for error the way they play. I think if you get an early penalty on offense, or if they get a negative yardage play, then they're really behind the 8 ball. But they made it work. I mean, you got to give the guy credit. To beat Miami on the road, I thought was a huge win. And then to handled Baylor, an explosive team, even more so than Missouri, was impressive.
Yeah, and K-State's defense isn't dominant by any means. I mean, they did give up 5 touchdown passes to Griffin, but they were pretty clutch. I mean, they made the plays they had to make. They got the big interception there in the fourth quarter. At Miami, they made the big goal line stand there and stopped the quarterback from getting in the end zone to win the game. So, yeah, their defense has been more clutch than dominant. But Missouri's got to take advantage. They cannot afford a bunch of 3-and-outs again like they had at Oklahoma there.
All right, well, that'll do it for this week. Next week, we will discuss what happened in the Kansas State game and look forward to Missouri's homecoming game against Iowa State.